guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here. Today, I want to talk to you about the 1979 Captain America movie starring Reb Brown. This DVD has both of the Reb Brown Captain America movies on it. I have only seen the first one, so that's the one that I'm going to talk to you about today. This movie bears almost no resemblance to the Captain America of the comic books, and if you can get past that, this is an okay movie. It reminded me a lot of other action adventure shows from the 1970s, like The $6 Million Man or The A-Team, or a little later, The Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby. Although I feel like that series hit a little closer to the mark on being an adaptation of the source material, whereas this, it feels like somebody had never even looked at a Captain America comic and just completely made up their own thing. So if you are able to get past the fact that this really has nothing to do with the Captain America of the comics, and if you like 1970s adventure TV shows like what I mentioned, then you might enjoy this. The problem is, I don't especially love 1970s adventure TV shows. I think they're okay. I've dabbled a little bit in The $6 Million Man. I enjoyed the Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno Hulk series, but it's not my favorite thing. I like stuff that came a little later, stuff in the 1980s I liked a little better than stuff in the 70s, so this was a little bit of a chore for me. And I guess I should go ahead and explain the plot. The plot is incredibly convoluted. So basically, you've got a guy named Steve Rogers in the present day, so 1979. He is not a World War II veteran who was frozen in suspended animation. He is just a normal guy. He just spent a few years in the Marines, and then he got out, and he gets a call from a longtime family friend who is in trouble and needs Steve's help. But before he can go and meet that guy, he meets another guy. His name is Simon. Simon says he used to work with Steve's father on a project called FLAG. And FLAG stands for something. Basically, it's a super soldier serum project. And basically, Steve's dad had perfected FLAG and injected it into himself. And then at some point, Steve's dad died. And now FLAG has been trying to recreate this serum and has not been able to do so. But this organization believes that they can do some tests on Steve and figure out the correct way to make this process work, because all the animals that they've tested it on are dying like a couple weeks after they get injected. And so they hope that with studies on Steve's body, they will be able to figure out what they're missing so that they can make this process work. And Steve isn't really sure about that. He doesn't really want them to do that. And meanwhile, this other organization called Zeus, they are making several attempts on Steve's life. And in fact, they kill Steve's family friend who needed Steve's help. Steve's family friend was also working on Zeus, and Zeus is a neutron bomb. And basically the bad guys of the movie are everyone else who is working on this neutron bomb. Eventually you find out that they want to use the neutron bomb to destroy, I guess kill a whole bunch of people at a bank with a whole lot of gold, but it will leave the gold intact, and then they can get filthy rich. That's basically their plan, but you don't find that out until over halfway into the movie, more like over 2/3 of the way into the movie. But basically, these guys, the reason that they can't move forward with their plan is that Steve's family friend, who also worked with Zeus, he had taken some photographs of some formula that they need to activate the neutron bomb. And then he hid the film of what he took photos of, and then the bad guys need the film. And they think that Steve Rogers has information on where the photographs are. So after they've tried to kill him a couple times, then they're like, well, now we need him alive so we can find the photographs. And then eventually, the guy who's in charge of Zeus, he just walks into the house and has a gun on this lady and says, hey, I need, well, that's not exactly what happens. He presents himself as a family friend of this girl. Her father's the one who died. And then he says, you know, hey, where do you think these photographs might be? And you find them inside a fishing rod. And then when one of the people from FLAG comes over to talk to the girl, then he puts a gun on them, he imprisons them, and then he's going to go and use the neutron bomb. And the problem with this movie, other than it has nothing to do with the Captain America of the comics, is that it's very slow. Hardly anything happens in this movie. It is an hour and 37 minutes long. It is about 37 minutes into the movie when Steve is in a motorcycle crash and he is dying, and then the doctor in charge of FLAG, he decides to use the serum on Steve and hope for the best. 37 minutes into an hour and 37-minute movie that Steve gets his powers. And then it is an hour and 11 minutes into the movie when Steve finally decides that he is going to use his powers for good and help Simon with this thing. And that's only because two people that he knows have been kidnapped by the bad guys. There are multiple scenes in this movie where Simon is trying to convince Steve to use his powers and become an agent who basically is a superhero who works for the government. And Steve keeps saying, I'll let you know, I'm going to think about it for a little while. It is so boring. This character, I don't feel anything for him. He's not proactive in the least. He only decides to use his powers to save people when it's people that he knows who are in danger. And I can kind of see where he's coming from, because he had no choice in getting these powers. This other guy, he wanted to save Steve's life, but it's very clear that he also wants to study someone who has these abilities. And it almost feels like this guy is more interested in having a superhero work for him than saving Steve's life. But Steve says, no, we're not going to test out my abilities. We're not going to do tests on me. Now that I'm awake, I'm making the choice. No, we're not doing this. And I can kind of see where he's coming from. He didn't really have a choice, but then once he wakes up, he wants to take control and then not do anything. That's the big problem. An hour and 11 minutes into an hour and 37-minute movie is when he finally decides, yes, I am going to become Captain America. And the reason he becomes Captain America, at one point, Simon, the guy in charge of Flag, he says, I used to know your father, we used to work together, he used this serum on himself, and he really believed in the American ideal. And then Steve says, so he was kind of like a superpowered crime fighter, right? And the guy says, I suppose that's one way of looking at it. And I was thinking, no, that's the way of looking at it. There's not many other ways of looking at it. But he says, they had a nickname for him, Captain America. They meant it mockingly, but the name really fit. And then he talks about how he used his powers, and he was a superpowered crime fighter, but then at the very end of the movie, actually, no, I'm skipping around, I'm sorry. So, while Steve is at the beach, and he's drawing, and we saw earlier in the movie that he drew a picture of the ocean and gave it to his friend who was collecting mail for him, and his friend owns a surfboard rental shop, and so he gives that to the guy, so we know that Steve can draw, and that is the only thing that this movie has in common with the Captain America of the comics, is that both of them are artists. But anyway, then Steve is at the beach. This is after he has gotten the powers. He's drawing something. We don't see what it is. And then Simon comes to talk to him and says, I want to tell you about your dad. And then they're walking as he's telling Steve about his dad. And they called him Captain America. And then Steve says, that's great. Here, I want to give you this picture that I drew before you told me about Captain America. And it's roughly a picture of a Captain America costume. It's someone in like an action pose in a Captain America costume. And then Simon's like, this is fantastic. The best thing I've ever seen. Can I keep it? And then Steve gets a motorcycle from Simon, and he gets the shield that's bulletproof, and this is all before Steve has made the decision to actually come work for Simon. Simon is relentless in trying to get Steve to work for him. He says, look, we fixed up your van that crashed earlier, and we gave you this motorcycle and this shield that's bulletproof, even though it looks like it weighs about half a pound and it's made of plastic. It's bulletproof and it's awesome. And then there's like a 5 to 10 minute chase scene where these people in a helicopter are shooting at Steve, even though they still need to know where the film is that will give them the information they can use to start the neutron bomb. They're still shooting at Steve for some reason, and then he stops them. But again, it's only when his two friends are kidnapped, one of them who works for Flag and one of them who's the daughter of the guy who died. It's only when they're kidnapped that Steve says, I'm going to go save them. And Simon says, well, I made a costume based on the drawing that you made, and you need to wear that to protect your identity, because there's already been several attempts made on your life by this point, so it would be better if you wear this costume and it will protect your identity. So Steve does that, and you know what the costume looks like. This is kind of an approximation. I don't even know if that's Reb Brown there, because you can't see his eyes there, and in the movie you can see his eyes more clearly. But Steve wears the costume. They figure out that the neutron bomb is going to be used to kill all the people at a bank so that they can steal all the gold, and then Steve goes and stops them. The day is saved, yay. And then we find out that the guy who was murdered, the father of the girl who was kidnapped, it turns out the reason he had taken a photograph and was working with the people at Zeus on their plan before he betrayed them, the reason he did that is because his wife, who has been believed dead for over a year, it turns out she was still alive. They had her captured and they were blackmailing this guy. And we find that out in like the last 5 minutes of the movie. By the way, mom is still alive, so the girl gets to go and meet her mom. Yay, I thought you were dead for over a year, but now we can just get on with our lives, I guess. And then Steve tells Simon, by the way, if I'm going to keep being Captain America, I want to wear my dad's old costume. So then you get another costume at the end of the movie that also looks nothing like the Captain America costume of the comics. And I'm confused at this point because at no point did Simon say that your dad wore a costume. He just says that your dad was a superpowered crime fighter and he shook a lot of people out of trees. He doesn't say anything about Steve's dad wearing a costume. In fact, Steve drew a picture and gave it to Simon before Simon even mentioned anything about Steve's dad being a superhero, and gave it to Simon, and that's where Simon got the idea for the costume. And then out of nowhere, Steve says, I want to wear my dad's old costume. Where did this come from? This movie is glacially slow. There are action scenes all over the place, but the problem is they're action scenes from the late 1970s, and they're not very good. The budget for this was $1 million, which is very low, even in 1970s dollars. Apparently, the next movie had a budget of $3 million, so I'm assuming that the next movie is going to be at least a little better, going to have higher production values, I hope. But really, a lot of this, I don't think that the actors are bad. I just don't think that the material is very good. It does not have anything to do with Captain America, so if you like the character in the comics, you're not going to enjoy this movie. And also, not a whole lot happens here. We get a whole lot of, oh, here's an action scene. It's a chase scene where Steve's on a motorcycle. Or here's some guys shooting at Steve. They want the photographs. Or he's in a meatpacking plant and he's throwing meat at these guys. There's a whole lot of that. But Steve takes forever to make a decision to become Captain America. It is awful. So I would not recommend this movie to anyone. And it's weird. I feel like this movie has a reputation. When you hear about pre-2000s comic book movies, especially bad ones, you hear about like Howard the Duck and you hear about Captain America, but it's anyone's guess if you're talking about the Matt Salinger Captain America movie from 1990 or if you're talking about the Reb Brown movies. And when you mention Reb Brown, there's a chance you're talking about the movie Space Mutiny or you're talking about one of these. But I had never really heard a lot of people talk about these Captain America movies, and I can see why. They're really boring and there's just not that much to talk about. So since I do have the other one here, I'm probably going to watch it and talk about it too. So look forward to that sometime in the future. But in the meantime, that's about all that I have to say about this movie. So I will see you guys in the future. Have a good one.